Okay students, this is a very quick 5-minute revision video on Lexis and Semantics. It's designed to complement the video on grammar that's also available on the channel and has also been sent out to you via email. So, Lexis and Semantics, the simple stuff. Let's have a look at the same quotation we saw on the other video. When a distinguished but elderly scientist states that something is possible, he's almost certainly right. When he states that something is impossible, he's very probably wrong. So if we're going to analyse Lexis and Semantics, the first thing you want to think about is register. You want to think about the register, and then the formality, the frequency, and also things like syllables. So let's have a look at the first three things. Register is pretty high overall. Distinguished, elderly, possible, impossible. These are quite complicated words. Formality is about how official the words are, or how sort of deferential or sort of non-colloquial they are. So we can see that distinguished but elderly is quite an official way to refer to somebody. Frequency is about how common the words are. So even though a word like he and is, these functional words are pretty common, that's not that interesting, but a lot of the most important words are quite low frequency. Elderly is not a very common way to talk about somebody old. It's a more respectful way, a more formal way to talk about somebody old. It's a low frequency adjective. You can also think about syllables. So how many syllables in the word is that of interest? Here we've got some lovely polysyllabic adjectives: distinguished, elderly, possible, impossible. But we've also got very, very important, right at the end of the sentences, monosyllabic adjectives, right and wrong. So the simple way into Lexis here, the lexical level of analysis, is we look at the words, we think about how complicated, how official, how common, and how many syllables there are in those words. It's an easy way to get into some important analysis of Lexis. Okay, onto the mid-range stuff then. So we've got the same quotation there, and now we're thinking about the mid-range stuff, the more semantic level of analysis. So let's think about what we can do. The first thing to do is think about lexical or semantic fields. We're getting into some detailed analysis. Are there any lexical or semantic fields here? Don't worry too much about the difference. There is a technical difference. It's not something you need to worry about too much. All we're looking at is the words. Are there any words in similar areas? Probably not that much here. I'd probably say distinguished and elderly. They're both in a sort of semantic field of age or experience. Maybe even things like right and wrong. The semantic fields say judgment. And then possible and impossible, these semantic fields say possibility. But there's not an awful lot we can do there, but it is something to think about. But something we really can do is get into detail. After your overview, all analysis is about detail, getting to the detail of the nuts and bolts of the text. So pick a word and tell me about the connotations. Is there something interesting going on with the connotations of that word? What associated meanings are there? So there's a word there, distinguished, which is screaming out, I've got some key meanings, I want you to explore them. So it's not simple. You can think about it. Distinguished, does it mean quite elderly, possibly a bit older? Does it mean perhaps quite experienced? Does it mean somebody who's been through quite a lot? Does it mean someone who's distinguished as in better than others? It's got key associated meanings that help them craft this stereotype of a scientist. Collocations is words that traditionally go together, like fish and chips. So I think really you can say distinguished but elderly. That's nearly a collocation. There's something collocative there, but again, not an awful lot we can do with this one. Onto the high-end stuff then, the much more important high-end analysis of Lexis and Semantics. So we can talk about the contrast. Is there a contrast created between the polysyllabic, high-register, low-frequency adjectives and the mid-register, monosyllabic adjectives? So look at that. Distinguished but elderly scientist in that noun phrase, very probably wrong in that adjective phrase. There's a big difference between those types of words, lexically and semantically. We've also got a contrast between polysyllabic adjectives, possible and impossible. Clarke is creating this big opposition between the possible and the impossible, the direct opposites. So they're both adjectives, but they're the direct negation of each other, direct opposites. He's crafting this view of either this or that, a very direct sort of tenor to the text. The contrast between the high-frequency monosyllabic adjectives right and wrong. So overall in the whole text we're seeing big use of contrast. That's a really important semantic feature, this creation of contrast within the text. And then, of course, rhetorical devices. If you watch the grammatical video on the same quotation, you'll see parallel syntax, but that can also be seen semantically as a type of rhetoric, a way of sounding good, of sounding like you know what you're talking about. Right then, let's put it all together. Look how good this would be if we were analysed like this. Clarke utilises a contrast between low-frequency, high-register, polysyllabic adjectives in the semantic field of old age, such as distinguished and elderly, and lower-register, more simplistic, monosyllabic adjectives, such as right and wrong. Moreover, the polysyllabic adjectives distinguished and elderly modify the noun scientist, which has connotations of respect and tradition. This adds a respectful yet direct tenor to Clarke's writing and allows him to craft an image of a stereotypical older scientist. Just think about how good that sounds. That's going to get an A or an A star if you've already done a really good overview. You can write like this, but it's just simple terminology, but loads of it to describe what's going on in the text in quite a common sense way. Final stuff to revise then. We've got mono, di and polysyllabic, high, low and mid frequency, high, low and mid register, formality, connotations, collocations, lexical fields and semantic fields, and then your rhetorical and literary devices like figurative language, metaphor, simile, imagery, things like that. So go back to your glossaries, get revising those key terms, and get practicing analysing Lexis and Semantics.